I'd like to take this opportunity to declare my deep disliking of Windows 11. Now, if you've been with me for a while on this channel, you know that I've grown up with Windows as far back as Windows Me. Now, granted, to say that I've grown up with Windows is not really anything special, because the average human being has probably grown up using some form of Windows. And I mean, for some people, it may have been as something like Windows 2000, Windows XP, or even Windows 7 if you're really young. But for someone as old as me, Windows Me would be where I got my start on Windows usage. And honestly, Windows 11 has not been very good. I don't like this operating system one bit. It hogs more resources than Windows 10 did, and I can definitely say that at once I installed this operating system that I could clearly tell that it uses a lot more resources than 10 ever did. That being said, it still has all the unnecessary stupid bloat that I didn't ask for. Now, some people would say, well, when the bloat, you could just get rid of the bloat and all that. Well, how come Windows can't just let me install the base operating system? Because the whole point of an operating system is literally so I could just run, my software on this. That's it. I could run my games, I could run my editing software, I could run my web browser, I can run just about anything on here. That's all I need it for. I don't need my operating system to tell me what the news is. I could just Google what the news is. If I want to find out, how my government's fucking me in the ass, I could do that on Google. I could literally search up AP on Google and read an article from the Associated Press. I really don't need Windows to tell me what the news is. As for the weather, I mean, I guess it's kind of convenient, but then again, I could check my phone for what the weather is. Really, all I need Windows to do is just tell me what time it is, what day it is, and to make sure that everything's running smoothly. That's all I really need to know. I don't need all the extra fancy features that Windows has or whatever. Now, when people tell you they don't like bloat on these operating systems, that's usually what most people mean. I mean, the other huge problems about Windows 11 are the lack of privacy. Windows 11 obviously has some more invasive features on it in terms of how it tracks what you do on it and the type of data it sends into God knows where to sell your information to God knows who. So they could sell you ads. Well, they could pump ads into whatever it is you're using. It is kind of creepy sometimes when you're browsing the internet. I mean, granted, I have ad blockers turned on, so I don't really have to worry about ads being all over the place, but it is still kind of creepy sometimes when you don't have an ad blocker turned on yet because you just installed a fresh installation of Windows, and it's already like knowing what you're interested in just by some of the programs that you've installed and shit like that. But to make matters even worse, the whole inclusion of AI in Windows 11 is not something I'm a big fan of. I know the importance of AI. I've mentioned that several times before on this channel, but I don't like my operating system telling me about the glories of AI, Windows Copilot. Like, if I wanted to use Windows Copilot, I can just install that, out of my own volition. I don't need Windows to automatically install that when it comes to updates. Also, installing updates on Windows 11 is a pain. Now, it was also a pain on Windows 10, but Windows 11 has a special level of shit when it comes to updating this operating system. Every now and then, I'll get an update for Windows 11 that just breaks something, or like Windows 11 just doesn't want to install the update right, and I have to like find ways around it to get the update to install, and I just have to skip a whole update altogether until the next update comes, where then I can actually update Windows 11. This is just not a pleasant operating system to use. Also, this is one of my little pet peeves about this operating system, having the taskbar at the bottom center of my fucking screen. You don't know how much that annoyed the crap out of me when I first. I know it's petty to argue about that, because you could just adjust it to the left side of the screen where where the start button belongs, as God intended. For the Windows icon, the start button, to be on the bottom left corner of the screen. I mean, my Windows, for example, I like to keep things very simple. When it comes to my own personal computer, I'd like to have my whole thing, my whole setup be as simple as possible. My taskbar is not littered with a bunch of crap everywhere. The only time I ever litter my taskbar with a bunch of crap is on like a work computer or something, where I gotta have specific programs I use at my job to actually, have quick access to them. But that's different. My own personal computer, I really don't like having a bunch of crap everywhere. On my desktop, if anyone's ever seen my desktop, I'm not gonna show my desktop because there's a bunch of crap all over my desktop. But I have a lot of crap on my desktop. It is, neatly organized on the left side of the screen, but that's how I like having things organized. And honestly, Windows 11 to me is just not a good operating system, but I think the one area where this operating system really shows its dookie levels of shite is when it comes to running games. Running games on Windows 11 and then comparing that to running games on something like SteamOS on my Steam Deck. Now, granted, my Steam Deck obviously is not as powerful as my PC. My PC has a RTX 2070 Super inside of it, while the Steam Deck has the AMD CPU GPU thing that's inside of my Steam Deck. I mean, I have an LCD Steam Deck, one of the earlier models of the Steam Deck, because I was one of those early adopters of the Steam Deck back in the day, because I genuinely have faith in this device. I don't use it very often, because sometimes I just don't find a use for it. Other times I use it to, like, just watch videos or something on it, or, like, have something playing, like, have, like a second computer to look at stuff, or sometimes if I want to play, like, a random JRPG or something that I know runs pretty easily, I'll use my Steam Deck for that. But for the most part, the Steam Deck, it's a nice device. I love the how nice it feels in the hands. It's a very sturdy built device. It runs most games. I mean, up to, I would say, PS4, Xbox One era games. If you attempt to run something from the PS5, Xbox Series X onward, I'm honestly not of the type to recommend you to play that. You'll see it right now in front on screen some footage I took of Stellar Blade on Steam Deck. I mean, it is still amazing that the game can run on Steam Deck, but it as you can see, it doesn't look very pretty, and I don't advise trying to run Stellar Blade on Steam Deck unless you really are jonesing to play this on the lowest resolutions possible with the lowest graphics imaginable. I mean, props to Shift Up for making the game look at least somewhat tolerable on Steam Deck, but it really does beg the question of you went as far to ask could you do it, but you didn't stop to ask yourself should you do it. And running Stellar Blade on Steam Deck is one of those, should you have really attempted to run this on Steam Deck? And God forbid you decide to tweak the graphics settings for this game on Steam Deck, because your Steam Deck will then sound like it's about to take off and fly to the Bahamas for the weekend. But no, the main thing I will say I have to applaud the Steam Deck for is SteamOS. I mean, I guess in the sense I have to applaud Valve for doing this, because SteamOS, well, it's Linux, and Linux has its own fair share of problems, and I know that there's going to be people who absolutely love Linux to death. They have their own specific version of Linux they use, their own distro they like using, like Arch Linux or Ubuntu or Linux Mint or something like that. My experience with Linux has primarily come in the form of using the Steam Deck, SteamOS, because I've never had much of an actual reason to use Linux for anything. Historically, for my knowledge, Linux has not been a very amazing operating system to use for gaming, and that's my main focus when getting a computer. So people would say, maybe 20 years ago, people would ask, why would you buy a PC to play video games on it? You could just buy a console, buy some cartridges, or buy some games on discs and all that, and just pop something in and play it like that. Well, yes, that is nice and dandy and all. Times have changed. Microsoft is getting to the point where they're not going to make consoles anymore. It's safe to say the Xbox Series X/S is probably going to be the last console we ever see Microsoft churn out ever. The PS5 is basically just turning into the iPhone of consoles. It's overhyped, has all these expensive peripherals that we really don't know why the hell it needs to have them, and it's just not a budget-friendly experience. And Nintendo is still doing what they always do. But on the PC side of things, when you buy one of these computers, one of the main things that most people are probably going to be looking at a computer these days is, can it run games, and what kind of games can it run? Because, let's be reals here, the average PC buyer is going to be roughly around under the age of 40. There might be a couple of people over the age of 40 who are buying PCs, but these are guys who've been into the whole PC gaming thing long. Like, these are like the OGs of being into this. But anyone who's going to buy a PC who's under the age of 40 is probably going to look for a computer that can run some kind of games on it. Some people might say, well, I don't need like something that can run, I don't know, like, I don't need a PC that can run, like, I don't know, like, I don't need the PC to run Elden Ring, for example. I don't need something that strong. I just need something that can run maybe PS4, Xbox One level stuff, kind of like a Steam Deck, but in PC form, like a full-blown desktop form. Which, I mean, that's all nice, but that's all nice, but again, you're still buying a PC with some kind of intention to game on the thing. Like, yeah, like some people would say, well, I mostly use my PC for work, or I use it for my studies or whatever, but let's be honest, at some point, your PCs have evolved to the point where you can run probably PS2, Xbox era games with ease, and probably some PS3, Xbox 360 era games with ease on like one of the really weak level PCs. That's how far we've come technology-wise. So, to say that you're buying a computer without the mindset of wanting to play games on it in 2025, it's something that it's just kind of silly as a company to not think about this one big important thing when people are making a decision on what kind of PC to buy or what kind of parts to buy if they're building a PC, or hell, even if they're buying a laptop. You know, they're probably going to buy a laptop that can be used for some kind of gaming. I mean, handheld gaming PCs like the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally, or as I like to call it, the ROG Ally, things like these have changed the game to some extent. I remember like maybe 15, 20 years ago, these types of devices, they existed, but they were pretty crude and ran Windows XP like ass, and they just weren't pleasant to use. Now that we have a device like the Steam Deck that shows you run an operating system like Linux on a device like this, and it runs games pretty damn smoothly, you know, thanks to Proton, and really, the gaming on PC has evolved to a point where the operating system is key. PC gaming is one of the biggest things that's going to drive PC sales for decades to come at this point. Especially, like I said, as the console market slowly evaporates more and more and is just turning into Sony versus Nintendo, and probably at the end of the day it's just going to be Nintendo really dominating console sales. When Microsoft is getting to the point where they are considering now making a ROG Ally Xbox version, because this is their response to the Steam Deck, as now Microsoft has actually been called out by Valve when it comes to their operating system, that it just runs better. Like, it just runs games better. Like, certain games run better on SteamOS than they do on Windows. Windows is just a very resource-hogging operating system. Even after you've de-bloated it like I have, because I've seen videos on YouTube on how to de-bloat Windows 11. It's a pain to do it, but once you do it, it runs a little better, but it still runs like shit because Windows 11 is just a shit operating system to use. But it baffles my mind that after all these years, Microsoft has never really worked on the gaming side of Windows. Like, they know their operating system is used for gaming, but I feel like as I use this operating system, it was just slapped together just to kind of churn something out, just throw something out there to the wolves and see how it does. And so far, Windows 11 has not been what I would call an amazing experience for gaming as when compared to Windows 10. Yeah, things do run pretty smoothly between the two operating systems. The transition has been smooth for the most part, but some games do see some kind of noticeable performance decrease compared to running them on Windows 10. But then the real nail in the coffin was seeing those same exact games running on the Steam Deck with SteamOS, or hell, even now that SteamOS is available on other handheld devices like the ROG or the Lenovo Legion Go, things like these. When you can run SteamOS on other handheld gaming PCs and compare that to running Windows 11 on these devices, running the same game on this exact platform with different operating systems, you could clearly see the difference night and day. Games like Cyberpunk run infinitely better on SteamOS than they do on Windows 11. I mean, like I said, Microsoft getting into this whole handheld gaming PC market with the ROG Ally Xbox Edition, having it come with a edited version of Windows 11 that's still Windows 11, it's just a de-bloated, very gaming-friendly version of Windows 11, is nice to see. Hopefully, something like that could be available for desktop, because, it would be nice to no longer have to be, held down by the shittiness that is all the crap that Windows 11 comes with. If Microsoft got to this point because Valve pushed them to this point, it's nice to see that Microsoft, I keep calling it Windows, that Microsoft is taking this approach to actually wanting to make this operating system be much more tolerable to use, because we're stuck with this operating system until God knows when, and if we're stuck with it, at least make it worth using. Don't make the operating system frustrating to use. I like to keep things simple. I don't need all these fancy quote-unquote convenience features. I just need to make sure that it runs what I need it to run. Now, when people say, well, why don't you just switch over to Linux? It's really easy to switch over to Linux. Why do you keep using Windows? It runs like ass. Look, I know this operating system runs like ass, and after spending, quite a while with the Steam Deck, for how long have I had my Steam? Like probably 2 years now I've had my Steam Deck. After having spent time with the Steam Deck for 2 years, using SteamOS, just getting to know Linux more, I've come to realize one of the big flaws about Linux. Installing certain software on Linux is not as simple as it is with Windows. That's just a given. I know some people say, well, you have to get used to the console. It's like once you get used to the console and you get used to using the console, Linux opens itself up to you. That's nice and all that you're wanting people to learn how to use the console, but keep in mind, not everybody using Windows and Linux is going to be someone like me who at least knows a good bit about computers. Not to the point where I can call myself an expert at computers, but someone who can kind of know better on how to navigate through one of these operating systems. The average user is, for lack of a better term, kind of dumb at using a computer. They're going to use these operating systems, and they're just going to want to do the basic level things. They don't even bother tweaking these things or changing these settings or even changing the cosmetic aspects of their operating system. They just need it to work, because they're probably using it for the most basic levels of shit imaginable, like work or school or video editing or maybe some light gaming, maybe. But really, getting into gaming is one of those things that kind of drives you into wanting to understand more how an operating system works. It makes gaming on PC a bit easier, a bit more understandable. But when comparing Windows 11 to SteamOS or just Linux in general, again, there are games that run better on Linux than they do on Windows. Meanwhile, there's games that run better on Windows than they do on Linux. Installing games on Linux, primarily games that were, every game that exists was meant to run on Windows. It's very rare to find a game that was made to run on Linux. Some of the few games that I recall can run natively on Linux without any need for Proton to be used for compatibility. I know Team Fortress 2 is one of the few games I can recall that has native Linux support. I think Valve in general just makes all their games have some kind of Linux support, because Valve has a huge interest in wanting to promote Linux gaming, and I get it. I'm all down with the idea of knocking Microsoft off that pedestal that they've held for decades, where Windows was really the only option you had, the only viable option you had for an operating system on a PC, because everything just is made with Windows in mind. Instead of trying to get developers to make Linux-friendly software, just simply make a compatibility layer that lets you run Windows software on Linux. It's all nice and dandy. The problem is, when it comes to gaming, one of the things that I will say will forever hold Linux back, for now, is anti-cheats. Now, some people would say, why do you care about anti-cheats? Why are you playing these crappy online only live service games? Like, for example, some of the biggest games that use anti-cheats that are just not compatible with Linux would be games like Fortnite or Warzone, or I know Destiny 2 will ban you, from what I recall, if you try and run it on Linux. Some other games that I can think off the top of my head, I think Apex Legends is another one that just doesn't want to play friendly with Linux. I know up until, I think, GTA 5 was another case of a game that just did not want to work on Linux because Rockstar did something stupid with the game in its anti-cheat, if I remember correctly, and fucked a whole bunch of compatibility with GTA 5 and Linux. I don't know if they've patched that out since then, but I do recall GTA 5 was one of those that had that problem. But the biggest like negative, and as y'all know, I'm a guy who plays Fortnite quite regularly. One of the things that would keep me from completely wanting to adopt Linux as my operating system as that. Like, look, I get it. It's like, well, why are you playing Fortnite? Oh, well, the game is retarded. The community is a bunch of idiots, and why are you playing such a stupid kiddie game? I mean, it's T-rated first off, and second of all, I enjoy that dumb kitty retarded game that people seem to really enjoy shitting on, even though Fortnite is almost a decade old at this point, and really shitting on Fortnite in 2025 is like beating a dead horse. Like, I get it. You don't like the game. You don't like the myriad of goofy cosmetics and shit in the game. I enjoy the clusterfuck nature of the game. There's some aspects of Fortnite that I have disagreements with, like matchmaking and sometimes just caving into the unnecessary needs of the competitive scene. But that's a topic for another video. But the main thing is that I like playing Fortnite. If I can't play Fortnite on my PC because it's running Linux and Linux just doesn't play well with Fortnite, like Fortnite will run on Linux. People have tried running Fortnite on Linux. It runs very well. The problem is the anti-cheat. Easy anti-cheat is just not enabled for Linux on Fortnite because lo and behold, Tim Sweeney, at least as far as I'm aware, the CEO of Epic Games, probably isn't too keen on the idea of letting people play his bread and butter, his baby Fortnite on Linux, the operating system that is being used by his arch nemesis, the boogeyman for him, Valve, and their Steam Deck. That's probably the biggest reason why he doesn't want to have Fortnite running on Linux, because the excuse of, well, it doesn't have the kernel level access to your OS when you play Fortnite, and the anti-cheat can't do that, so it's not as safe and secure. Look, to be real with y'all about anti-cheat, if anti-cheats were so foolproof, I wouldn't be seeing the occasional cheater pop up in Fortnite. They don't pop up that often in Fortnite, but they still can pop up. You can still find somebody in Fortnite who's using wall hacks or aimbots or god mode shit. Usually aim hacks and wall hacks are two of the biggest things you can find on Fortnite cheaters using. If easy anti-cheat were so foolproof, I wouldn't be seeing this. I mean, hell, if any anti-cheat was foolproof, then Call of Duty wouldn't be a pain in the ass to play on PC with the fucking sea of cheaters that are out there. I mean, if you go into a Black Ops 6 lobby today on PC, you're going to bump into a cheater. Every match, or every like 3 or 4 matches, you're gonna bump into a cheater. Like some dude who's just nailing headshots left and right, just doing all those stupid like spin animation things that they do for those crappy montage vids that they do, where they're like, guys, look at my amazing kill that I got in Black Ops 6 that I spin like a retard in circles and shoot people, even though clearly I'm using some form of an aimbot. Like, if anti-cheats were so foolproof, you wouldn't be seeing cheaters in Black Ops 6. So the whole argument of like, well, it makes the anti-cheat not work out so well. Tim Sweeney's talking out of his ass. Let's just be honest. Like, I sorry, but it's the case. Like, and I know easy anti-cheat can run with Linux pretty well. I mean, Rocket League works, and that has easy anti-cheat. VR Chat, I played VR Chat on my Steam Deck, and that has easy anti-cheat, and it runs on Linux. I mean, I've played Halo MCC on my Steam Deck, and that has easy anti-cheat, and it runs as well. So, the whole argument that, easy anti-cheat can't really play well with Linux because Fortnite and reasons and blah blah. Look, Fortnite runs on Steam Deck. People have tried it before with old versions of Fortnite that are no longer supported. They've tried using these old versions of Fortnite on Steam Deck. They run smoothly. The only thing holding Fortnite back from being playable on Steam Deck is just literally easy anti-cheat. And I'm almost certain that you could enable the game to work on Linux, and it'll work perfectly fine. And really, the cheater concern isn't going to be, there. I mean, hell, if Fortnite runs on Android, and Android itself was Linux-based, but yet, you don't hear Tim Sweeney bitching about that, because it benefits him in this case, because he was able to keep Fortnite off Apple devices for so long, when we all know that whole little beef between Epic and Apple that just ended recently. And we all know that if you can get them to run on Android, and that's Linux-based, and I'm pretty sure Fortnite has some kind of anti-cheat that it uses for smartphones, then there is no excuse why Fortnite can't run on Linux. And I will continue making that argument until the day I die, which hopefully is in the distant future. Knock on wood. No, like, one of the biggest things that holds me back, and probably holds a lot of other PC gamers back from wanting to adopt Linux full time, is the lack of support for some of these big online only games. Again, Fortnite is one of the bigger live service games that exists. So is Warzone. Same thing with Apex. The three of the biggest live service titles out there. If you can't play these games on your operating system, you lose out a chunk of potential buyers or potential customers. Well, not really customers, but potential potential adopters of I think I'm using that wrong, but you get what I mean. You're losing out on potential new Linux users, because they're not going to want to switch over to an operating system where they can't play their big favorite online-only live service game if they just can't do it. I mean, hell, I can play Genshin Impact, Zenless Zone Zero, and Honkai Star Rail on Steam Deck. I can play Girls Frontline 2 on Steam Deck. I'm pretty sure when Blue Archive finally lands on Steam, that'll probably run on Linux with ease. So, again, and I'm pretty sure if COD Mobile were to get a dedicated, PC client, I'm pretty sure that would still run well on Linux. It would probably be one of the few modern Call of Duties that'll run on Linux. But the fact that these games, like these really big live service games, have anti-cheats that prevent them from running on Linux properly, or they'll just ban you for trying to run them on Linux, is one of the things that holds back Linux altogether. If you don't play any of these games and you don't like these games, or you don't give a shit about them, then by all means, like, there is really nothing stopping you from adopting Linux as your daily driver. I mean, really, the only other thing that could hold you back from adopting Linux is the lack of a Microsoft suite, things like PowerPoint and Microsoft Word and Excel and things like that, or Outlook or programs like these. But really, if you never use these programs, like in my case, I don't use them. I haven't used Microsoft Word in ages because I'm not paying for that crap. Last time I used it, I was in college, and that was like 6 years ago. So, I mean, I use a program called OpenOffice, I think is what it's called. It's like Microsoft Word, but open source. So, I don't mind using something like that. I mean, for video editing, DaVinci is what I would use for my video editing. That's what you've seen for a lot of these videos on my channel. A lot of these programs can work with Linux because they're open source and they play well with Linux, which is nice. So really, in that case, it's really more of a matter of you got to actually do your homework and find which software can do this on Linux and which software can do this on Linux. And really, it can be a very reliable operating system to use as your daily driver. As you get used to it more and more, you kind of, get used to it and you adopt it. Obviously, I will never fully be able to adopt Linux until, we get past the hurdle of anti-cheats, whenever that'll happen. So until then, for me personally, Linux is going to be like that side operating system I use on my goofy little portable handheld PC that I use to play obscure JRPGs and games like Evenical. Because honestly, I would rather be playing Evenical on a device like that than on on my giant monitor. It's just really weird. I don't like playing, for those of you who know what Evenical is, then you know what I mean. Playing a game like Evenical, I would prefer to play that on Steam Deck, or playing one of the more spicier visual novels like Eden plus Mosaic. I would prefer playing those type. I mean, hell, actually the Steam Deck is phenomenal for playing visual novels. It just feels a lot more like the Steam Deck was really meant to play those types of games. And again, I love this device, and I love what Valve is doing with SteamOS. I wish them all the best, because I would love to see Microsoft, taken down a notch, and it seems to be doing something. But again, what's holding Linux gaming from taking off full time is the stupid anti-cheat problem. If we can get past anti-cheats, and or at least making, or in the case of Activision, make an anti-cheat that fucking works, if we could make anti-cheats actually play nice with Linux and bring in, if Linux gaming at least builds itself up more and more as the years go by, there may be some kind of incentive to make the anti-cheats for these really big titles work on Linux. But for now, because there's not that kind of support, it's one of those things that makes it really hard to fully adopt Linux full-time for gaming. or for just full-time. I mean, for me personally, I would adopt it right now. If I could play Fortnite on Linux, I would gladly, uninstall Windows 11 and put Linux, put SteamOS or some Linux distro on my computer, probably Ubuntu or something, and just use that from now on. Of course, I would prefer SteamOS though, because it just I'm already kind of used to using that, so, and it kind of has like a good bit of support. I mean, it as far as I'm aware of, Ubuntu has a good bit of support as well, but having something like Valve backing a Linux distro does give you some kind of good peace of mind, especially when it comes to security updates and shit like that. But nevertheless, it's one of those things where Linux gaming and Windows gaming, they're always going to be, and especially nowadays, they're going to be going toe to toe. And it's only a matter of time until hopefully we get past the anti-cheat hurdle. And once we get past that hurdle, it's really just going to be an all-out war between both operating systems to see how you can convince PC gamers, which are now a big driving force for PC sales, to adopt which operating system they want to use. And these handheld gaming PCs, mark my words, they're going to be one of the big things that drive the industry in a specific new direction that the industry hadn't seen before. And it's going to actually finally push Linux gaming as a big thing to actually get into, especially now that we're seeing SteamOS now have support for other handheld gaming PCs. I mean, the big thing is when SteamOS finally has full-blown desktop support. Once we get to that point, I mean, that might make Linux gaming much more easy to handle for the average PC gamer. But until then, we just have to wait. We really just gotta wait. But yes, to sum things up, I hate Windows 11 still. I find this operating system to suck ass. I really wish that they didn't kill Windows 10. Windows 10 was a good reliable operating system. It had its flaws. It certainly as all hell was no Windows XP or Windows 7, but then again, those operating systems had their own flaws. But Windows 10 just felt nice, and it ran nice for the most part. Windows 11, it looks pretty, but aside from that, it runs like ass at times, and it can behave like ass at times. And honestly, Microsoft could have done a much better job on this operating system, and I hope that the increase in Linux users over the past couple of years kind of gives Microsoft some kind of incentive to improve on this operating system's reliability. Anyways, until then, thank you for watching my long rant, and I will see y'all next time. Peace.